Hello, Stacey-Ann. I think you're on mute now.
Hi.
All right. So good
Hi,
afternoon,
Koyan.
everyone. Okay, let me start recording. All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the forum on the venture. And I have with me Stacey-Ann Pearson. She's an amazing person. Don't worry, you're going to enjoy the conversation with her today. So today we're discussing series 6, the transformative economy, and what we want to unveil is what are the innovation models that directly impact economies? How do we make sure that our actions are creating an ecosystem that have net positive impact on our economy, especially within the context of Africa, where we have a narrative that is kind of creating a limitation on our economic potential and doesn't even fully represent our economic potential. So what we'll be doing today is engaging Stacey-Ann, for her to give us insight into the conversation. And we'll be having the conversation in 4 batches of 15 minutes conversations. You know how we do it. Start out with the trivia, trying to establish the connection with the guest. And then we move into the discourse where we try to understand the underlying mechanisms behind, our conversation. And then we go into the strategy session rather, where we gain insights from the experience that she has on the topic. And then we have the forum where we discuss the one thing that we need to focus all of our energy and efforts and resources on. So hello, Stacey-Ann. I hope you're feeling good. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm feeling really, really good. Hello, everyone. And thank you again, Toyin, for really inviting me into this discussion. These are really amazing topics, and I'm excited to get started.
All right, awesome. So first things first on trivia is how would you describe your current work right now, your current areas of interest, and how it relates to how economies are designed and how they are driven?
Right, right. Actually, I saw someone says, hopefully we can get to hear you speak Chinese. I thought that was very funny.
Yeah. We made that joke that
Yeah.
I'm going to speak Chinese. It'll be really nice if you do, because I have my own Chinese name also, so that'll
Right,
be
right,
fun.
right, right. Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, yeah. So at the end, then you guys have to stick around to the end. We can practice saying some sentences in Chinese.
Yay! Okay.
um, yeah. So I'm originally from Jamaica. But then I went to school for my undergraduate degree in the US. So I studied engineering and economics. And something that I'm sure will come up is that I really didn't enjoy the practicality of engineering, and so I decided to go into investment banking. And so I worked in New York for a bit at Morgan Stanley. And then that's when I realized that China is really playing a big role in just every aspect you can possibly think of. And so I looked at what were some different ways and arenas that I could get involved more directly with China. And Schwarzman Scholars came up, and so I applied, and that's how I arrived in China. So after my 1 year master's, I decided to stay in China and work in the technology and startup scene. So I first went to, it's like the Uber of China, helping them with their globalization strategy. And now I work in a blockchain research company that was started by Oxford University and the Hainan local government.
Wow.
So at my role or in my job, right, I do international business development. So what that means is that my team and I, we focus on putting or bringing together product, research, and academia, or business, I guess you could say. And so we have to find the ways to, take what the researchers have made, combine it with the product managers who are working on specific features, and then connect them with users in the appropriate markets, right? So let's say a developing economy, or young people, or people who have whatever the use cases are for the products that we work on. So a typical day might include um, going into the office. So I live close to the park. So I walk to the office, go in, I ensure that I have maybe an hour, hour and a half of news, catching up on markets, and finding out what's going on, not just in my industry, but in general, that could influence the market. And then I'll typically move on to, let's say, whatever the weekly goal is that we have for the team, and that changes depending on the time of year. Sometimes it might be self-improvement, sometimes it might be customer interviews, so
Mm.
sometimes it might be research. So it really varies. So yeah, so other than that, we do presentations, we make recommendations. Sometimes we have to speak with our partners in Chinese. Sometimes we speak with our partners in the United Kingdom and Croatia and Shenzhen. So yeah, so it can be really fun working in technology and working in the startup space. So yeah, so
That's really exciting. So if you were to take us back to your time as an undergraduate, I know you were in the US,
sure.
but I think problems normally share the same life essence. They just have different contexts. So, what do
Mm-hmm.
you think
Mm,
represented your biggest potential as an undergraduate studying in the US?
mm. Yeah, so one thing that you mentioned before that's really important is that I think African people and people of African descent, right? So including Caribbean people,
Yeah.
um, we tend to have a very limited definition of what success in or professional success means. It's either
Hmm.
you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, or you're an engineer,
Yeah.
right? So
Hmm.
these are things that I also grew up with in Jamaica. And so I was really good at math, really good at physics. And so that means that I must become an engineer.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so when I went to school in the United States, I just signed up for engineering because that's what was expected of me.
Hmm.
But going to Lafayette, it was a liberal arts college. So engineering was only one department, and you could take classes anywhere you wanted. And
Wow.
that, right, the opening up of the mind, right? The opening up of
Hmm.
the mind and the opening up of the way
Exposure.
to learning, right? So not just
Hmm.
about numbers, exactly, was very critical to me realizing that I don't want to work in engineering. I want
Hmm.
to I want to work in an industry that's dynamic. I want to understand what makes the world go around. I want to understand how, leaders are created, how business is made, how money is generated. And so I had that opportunity to do that in undergraduate. And I'm really grateful for that because I know if I'd gone to a directly engineering school, I might
Hmm.
not have had that opportunity to explore these other areas that I now enjoy.
Wow.
So I think
I
that's the
love
most
I love that.
impactful part. Yeah.
I love listening to that because I've been recommending a book by David Epstein about range, and it talks about how
Mm,
generalists survive in a specialist world. The world that we are getting exposed
right.
to is a multidisciplinary world, but we're still being, we're still being
Mm-hmm.
driven in a disciplinary way. So I think your response is,
It's crazy.
it's
Yeah.
yes, it's really exciting. So that's the biggest area of impact. More so, every undergraduate that is going to listen to this in Africa or around the world, expose yourself to other people's departments. Your department is not the alpha and omega of the opportunity you can access in your work. You're a
Mm-hmm.
student in political science,
Mm-hmm.
go to engineering and ask them and try to figure out, how does my
Mm-hmm.
understanding of political science influence the state of engineering? That is amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that
Mm-hmm.
with us. So one more question for the trivia is, now you intersect with a lot of markets, and I've been
Mm.
privileged to also work within a business consulting environment where I had to also deal with different markets. And one thing you experience is context.
Mm.
Context is where opportunity is created. What works in Croatia might not work in the US. What works in the US might not work in China, right? And that is one issue that has
Right.
created a
Right.
dysfunction within Africa. We just copy and paste. We don't contextualize. So what do you think,
Mm. Mm.
since young people make the bulk of population here in Africa, what do you think is the biggest economic potential of young people to define the economic reality of nations? And if you can contextualize it to Africa, or you can
Mm,
make it a general
mm,
statement. What do you think is that biggest area of potential
mm.
for young people across the world?
Right, right, right. But I think the greatest news, right, to what you're saying is that it's already happening
Hmm.
in countries across Africa. Because what
Wow.
I think the greatest potential in not just Africa, but most developing economies, the power
Hmm.
of youth is a change in mentality, the
Hmm.
frustration with the current reality.
True.
And that is so powerful. And that's why our leaders are scared, right? They're really scared because they know that empowered young people create substantial change. And I think that's already happening across all countries in Africa. And so that's one of the things that I've been most heartened by, being a third party observer of the movement and the development that's happening across the African continent, because we see, right, we see the entrepreneurship that's coming out, we see the number of talents that are coming, and so we also see the number of talents that are wanting to go back home. And that's a really important and critical piece of how do you generate development for economies, like for developing economies. And so that for me is what I've observed is one of the most powerful things, is for the young people to have the changed and motivated mentality. And so the next step after that is how do we use it in a way that is beneficial, or in a way that is constructive, right, in a way that activates change. And so that's the part that I think developing economies and countries in Africa, we still need to work on, which is how do we get the resources, right? Like, how do we get young people to recognize that there are other resources, there are online resources that they can utilize in a way that developed economies have been utilizing for generations. And so I think that's one of the key aspects. An example of that is these international organizations such as the United Nations, different development banks, the World Bank. All these organizations have incredible venture building programs, not just scholarships, but actual, professional development programs. And they struggle to find applicants from Africa, from the
True.
Caribbean, and from Latin America.
Hmm.
Right? Now, you can obviously say, oh, it's only because, we're not as qualified. That's not true. The reason is obviously is because we just don't have the same access to the information that North America and Europe has for, to be introduced to these programs. And so that, I think, is really the next step for, the African continent, the Caribbean, Latin America, is that we need to empower ourselves to get access to these resources that are available to us.
Hmm.
And so, those are some of the things that I think this platform is really trying to do.
Yeah.
And I myself, I also try to reach out, and if people reach out to me, I try to help, especially if they're, Black or of African descent, because I know there's a huge gap between, the resources that North Americans have and Europeans have to what Caribbean, Latin American, and African young people have. So that's what I would say about that. So,
Wow.
if you're a student and you're looking out there, trust me, there are resources online. And if you don't know, I will message Toyin, things that can be sent out to everyone who subscribes to his platform, because it really
Awesome.
is true that there are so many resources out there that we are just not accessing.
Yes. Wow. This is already so exciting. Amazing. Amazing. My mind is blown. So let's dive right into the discourse. Yesterday we're talking
Sure.
about series 6, the transformative economy. And mind you, I had never come across the concept. I didn't even know it was an actual concept when I was developing it for the series, and so it was exciting to have
Right.
a senior policy analyst from the Department of Economic Growth, the Nigerian Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning and Policy Programming, come on the platform yesterday and
Right.
help us define, the major characteristic of a transformative economy. And he says a transformative economy is one built not on consumption but on production, right? And that
Right.
was really profound for me because I'm like, whoa, I wasn't even aware that it was a thing. It was just a concept I had in my mind. So in the discourse,
Right.
Africa's current opportunity, Africa's market opportunity is currently defined by its consumption. Once you are reading some statistics or a report, you see that, oh, Africa has the biggest, potential and all of that. But then when you're reading why, it says it's because we have a billion people that, we're the next, big
Right. Large
market.
markets. Yeah.
Exactly. So they define the market
Right.
opportunity
Right.
based on
Right.
consumption and not on the creation of economic value.
Right.
And nations don't create wealth by
Mm.
consumption. So what do you think
Right.
is the biggest area of impact to redefine Africa's, market opportunity aside from just being consumers?
I mean, this for me is I don't know how to say, like, a little frustrating, right? Because I come from a very tiny region where we don't have many resources, and so we are truly defined by our consumption. Now, for me to look at the continent of Africa and for external and even like local people, right, to
Mm,
outlines Africa still as a consumptive market, it's still very puzzling to me because of the amount of natural resources and the amount of extraction production that actually happens in Africa.
happens, true,
But it
exactly.
still gets construed, right? But it still gets construed as a consumption market, a
Mm,
market that doesn't produce, and I'm always baffled by that. But
mm.
that's a
That's a
discussion for
conversation for
another
another
time.
day. Yeah.
Um, right. So I'm always, I mean, even though, right, local economists, they do talk about the production aspect, but I'm always skeptical about this aspect that Africa doesn't produce. But
Mm,
anyhow, so how do you move from this consumption mentality to the more wide scale global definition of production mentality?
yeah.
I think one thing that we often forget, right, is that we different regions across the world are going through different growth cycles,
Yeah.
right? So you have
Mm,
Europe, who went through theirs first, right? They were the original superpowers, especially the United Kingdom. And then they were overthrown by the United States, right? Through through rebellion, through wars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so now North America went through its growth cycle and development, and now it's the superpower. And now we're seeing sort of the third shift, right, in our modern history. Now
mm.
China is going through its growth cycle. And there's tension between the U.S. and China because
China,
now
yeah.
China is growing up to become possibly the next superpower.
Superpower,
And so
exactly.
I think a lot of times, right, I think a lot of times we forget, right, that large economies, such as these regions, and then including the African continent and including India, have to go through these cycles, right? And
Mm,
so I actually see Africa going through a consumption cycle as a very positive indication of its potential for the future.
mm,
Because if you remember, or if we can think back to China, even just 20 years ago, China was solely a consumption market, right? Like
mm.
companies only came to China because they had 1.4 or 1.2 at the time billion people,
Billion
and
people.
everyone was
Mhm.
running to come into China,
Mm,
right? And then the government, right, was very strict about their market economy and about companies sharing information, and then they started to do manufacturing, and then they started to do real production, not just
mm,
manufacturing but also technology. So
mm,
it's a cycle, right? It's a growth cycle. It's not something that we can just move from farming and like large scale farming immediately to high tech or high value chain production. So
mm,
I think it's a cycle that we're going through. Now, one thing that I do know for sure that we are struggling with in developing economies is the management of resources or
Mm.
mismanagement of resources.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the part that has really held a lot of developing economies back, is sort of this concentrated power at the top, concentrated mismanagement of resources at the top, that doesn't allow our economies to grow in the way that it should, right? Like as a cycle, after consumption, then comes manufacturing, then comes the production of high value chain products. And
Mm.
so obviously each country has to deal with their corruption in their own way. So I don't have any comments about how continental Africa can deal with their corruption. But I'm telling you, like in Jamaica and in the Caribbean, this is something young people are also talking about. How do we
Mm.
stamp out corruption, because it is really killing our economy?
Mm.
And so that for me is what I recognize for the African continent. Like thinking about the cycle, it's a cycle, and you
It's a
have to go
cycle.
through
Mm.
certain development stages, right, before you get to this area of large scale
High value.
prosperity. So
Awesome.
that's what I see. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I I really love this because it begs for the second follow-up question as planned. You talked about, the cycle
Mm,
and then the mismanagement of resources from the top about leadership. But
right,
the school of
right.
thought that the corruption that we see is actually a game of resources,
Mm,
meaning corruption only
mm,
exists because the barriers to access
mm-hmm,
to these resources are high. Once you can reduce the price of
right.
access to these resources, corruption will lose its
Mm-hmm,
power. So
mm-hmm,
power becomes something about access to
mm-hmm.
opportunity and not just about the resources itself.
Right,
So in this life
right.
cycle, we've been able to, from your response, be able to understand the impact of leadership through this cycle, because bad leadership just means we'll have
Mm-hmm,
stunted growth through this cycle. And even just like the way plants who experience
right.
stunted growth during their own cycles don't end up producing any actual harvest, it's an archetype of what could happen to
Mm,
Africa.
mm,
So the decentralization of leadership
right.
is a major is a major point to this.
You said the right word, which is decentralized. So I'll come back to that, but continue.
Okay, awesome. So how can young people, or okay, let's not even focus on young people since we're not talking strategy yet, but how can we decentralize leadership to make sure that the climate here in Africa is investment attractive, because you will need that
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to scale through this cycle of development. So how do you think we can decentralize leadership to make sure that the exploration and creation of economic opportunities is a reality?
Now, my friend, this is the $1 million question that everyone on the face of this earth in every developing economy everywhere is trying to answer.
Hmm. Oh, wow. Wow.
Right? So, how do you move developing economies from this state of corrupted or mismanaged institutions to a
Hmm.
phase where you have institutions that have acute responsibility and accountability to its people and to
Hmm.
growing its economy? And that's a really, really tough question. And different regions of the world deal with it differently. For example, in North America, they really believe in extremely strong institutions. And
Institutions.
right.
Hmm.
And so they have, right, right. So they have strong institutions that they build on really strong foundations, and they believe in those foundations to do the right thing. Right. So it's a
Hmm.
balance and check, or check and balance. In
Hmm.
China, they focus more on a very centralized model, right? So very centralized and non-corrupt, right? To try to reduce corruption, to move in a way that the central government controls the power and helps, or conditions the people to believe that the central government acts in its best interest. Now you have developing economies that either took their political system from their colonial masters, or they have their original systems from like native peoples, all the way back to before colonialism. And Now economies are trying to redefine or revisit, does this work? Does this still work for my economy? And so there are different ways, right? The most destructive way, of course, is for young people to rebel, right? Like to just demand that their leaders do better, or they riot or protest in the streets. Which we've seen over the past couple of years for different countries all over the Middle East and North Africa. And then you have this other phase of technology driven decentralization, right?
Mm.
So you have this idea that governments are decentralizing the power by infusing technology with their political system. So, for example, a
Mm.
country like Estonia, which is in Europe, it's a very small country. But it is able to utilize technology and digital transformation to completely galvanize its economy to, and it has grown, right? It has gotten international recognition, and now its economy is booming. And then you have some other means that I think African countries and Caribbean and Latin American countries will have to figure out, which is a combination of a lot of different things, right? So many people will have to play different roles and
Roles.
try different things at the same time. That's my
Mm.
personal belief, because
Mm.
we honestly don't know which one's going to work.
Work.
We've
True.
been confused for a very long time
Mm.
because we are or have been conditioned by our colonial, masters for how our institutions should look. And
Mm.
so, in my opinion, we have yet to really develop our own identities that really match our
Wow.
own markets. And
Wow.
so, for me, I think it needs to be that we empower our young people, that we don't just have to pick one path. We can
Mm.
actually empower our young people to each try different things, and
Mm.
whichever one works,
Works. Mm.
right? So for example, we could have young people who, like you mentioned earlier, in our separate call about not too young
To
to run,
run.
right? So we can encourage young people to, yeah, we can encourage young people to get into politics. So that's
Mm.
one means. We can also encourage people to we can also encourage other people to, let's say, try to leave the continent with the express intent of coming back,
Coming
right?
back.
So let's say
Mm.
doing programs like the United Nations, what do they call it, YPP program, Young Professionals Program, right?
Okay.
So the World Bank Group has it, the UN has it, development banks have it, right? Where they train you in how do you build strong institutions, and then they send you back to
Back.
your home country as a
Mm.
as a yeah as a post. So
Mm.
we can have a lot of people funneling into these institutions, international institutions, to develop what are some of the more formal ways of strengthening institutions, right? So that could be another way. Then you could have another way that's focused on galvanizing entrepreneurship, right? The idea
Mm.
generation, having people do grassroots innovation.
Wow.
So who
Amazing.
cares what outside thinks? I'm going to generate this, right? I'm going to generate this in my market. I'm going to find a problem and I'm going to solve it.
Of it.
And I'm going to
Mm.
trust the market to do the rest, right? Then you can have other aspects, right, where people go into more formal corporate structures, right? So
Mm.
empowering people in villages, empowering people in poorer
Mm.
communities to really focus on education, right?
Mm.
And getting them into more formal structures of professional life. And once you, right, like, and each country can figure out this set of things that young people, or pathways that young people can try all at the same time, and then see if any of them work. Perhaps if we're lucky, all of them will work, right? And then you start to get more success. But I'm truly of the belief that, I think we put a little bit too much faith in these external,
True.
like, I
Mm.
keep calling them colonial, because really, like, it's very frustrating for me that, let's
Mm.
say, the government of Jamaica, we still have these third party consultants that come from outside of our country to tell us how to run our
Run our
country.
country.
It's quite ridiculous.
Mm.
Yeah, and so a lot of developing economies, actually, the government spends a good chunk of money paying these consultants to tell us how to run our own economies. I think this needs to be revisited, right? We need to develop our own methods of how
Solving our
we
own
can grow our
problems.
economy, because who
Yeah.
else is right, who else is best to do that but ourselves? And so
Mm.
I'm of the mind that we need to upskill ourselves and take on the problem solving ourselves. And so if we can't beat corruption, we can decentralize it
Innovate around
to,
it.
you know,
Yeah. Mm.
decentralize success, exactly, to the
Mm.
point where it's impossible for them to be corrupt because it no longer goes only through the
True.
government.
That's
Do you get what
exactly.
I mean? So
Wow.
exactly.
Wow,
Yeah.
these are lovely insights into the conversation. And the last question for this,
Mm,
also acts as a follow up to what you said, that it's a cultural and identity
right.
problem. We
Mm,
Africans, that's like our biggest curse. We have not we
mm,
didn't have we had our identity and culture. We had identity and culture handed over to us. Ours was stolen away from us and handed another,
mm,
and all of that. And what that did
mm,
is that
mm,
because we did not create it, because we do not master it, because we did not that's the word, create it, we cannot, it is not built to change. It is,
confused.
yeah, exactly. It is not built to
Mm,
adopt and adapt to change. It is built to be resistant to change because we
mm,
didn't create it. And
mm.
one of the things you said
Right,
about how we
right.
can tackle the corruption and decentralization of leadership is if we can integrate. You actually give options, so you're actually posing a culture of innovation,
Mm,
a culture of looking for options to tackle one problem. Looking for what is the
right,
most effective and
right.
productive means. But right now that we do not have
Mm,
that cultural environment that adapts to the creation of other forms of
mm,
culture within that culture, how do we facilitate the
right.
creation of this innovation culture, in Africa, that is able
Mm,
to exploit change and create opportunities from it? How do we,
right, right,
especially as young people? So
right,
I want you
right.
to address us as young people. We don't let
Yeah,
give us the juice.
yes,
Give
yes, yes,
the young people of Africa the juice.
yes, yes, for
How can
sure.
we create our own
For
innovation
sure.
culture?
Yeah. Look, it's a change in mindset, honestly, because there was one thing, I forget who was, I was chatting with someone and they were saying, look, you are sitting there with the resources that you have, saying that you don't have the resources, and someone with less is
Mm,
doing more
mm,
than you are doing right now, right? So I definitely think it's this idea of change resources, because I tell you what, right now is the best time in history
mhm.
to launch something that you created yourself, because
Wow.
we have an explosive internet. The internet has no limitations except for if you have access to it, right? So that's the only limitation in terms of how do you generate or how do you create these ideas or this culture of innovation. If your government isn't doing it, or let's say some people who are passionate about politics and about government, they can work on the government, right? Like, so let's say we have half the people working on the government and then the other half of people working on their own ideas, right? So you have this dual approach of, okay, I need my government to be more supportive of innovation. They need to have more, let's say, trade schooling. They need to have more innovation training. They need to have more coding classes. They need to have more higher level of access to technology and the internet. So that's one part, right? That having people work with the government on getting those set up. Then you have
Mm,
the other half of the people, which is just encouraging people to look around them. What are problems that they're passionate about? You have to have
mm,
passion. And sort of empowering them that, look, you can create a solution.
mm,
Like, don't worry about money. Don't worry about all of that right now, because using the internet, like, you can launch things with zero money. The only thing you need is the internet. And
mm,
so once you start to launch things, you realize that people across the world pay for quality solutions,
mm.
regardless of where they come from.
True.
that for me is one of the most powerful sort of like mental changes that young people need to realize. Doesn't matter how young you are, doesn't matter, like where you are in school, doesn't matter where you come from. As long as you have a strong solution that you're passionate about, you can sell it online. Once you start to sell it even in your local communities, then you start to get partnerships, then you start to get traction, then you see international companies knocking on your door saying, hey, I like your idea, I want to give you money, right? But that idea is the first step. Now, this, of course, is now coming from a place of privilege for me because I have seen this, right? And so I know what it's like to be at home. We don't have any job, we don't have any money, and somebody's telling me, oh yeah, I can start something, don't worry about money. Look, I understand that, right? So we do also have to find ways to ensure that yes, we can, let's say, feed our families, or yes, we can eat, or yes, we can, pay the bills. But I think that needs to be one aspect of how we look at life. So it should never be that you're working at your job to to fulfill their dreams. It should be that you're working at your job to collect money to build your dream, right? So that's how I would say to look at it. Now, if you're not an entrepreneur, if you don't want to create solutions, then by yourself, then the only thing that you need to focus on is training yourself, right? So don't
Hmm.
ever be still, don't ever stand still. So if you feel that you're comfortable in wherever you are now, it means that you have not set enough or high enough goals for yourself,
Hmm.
because in the developed economy, people are always looking for ways to improve themselves and then use
Hmm.
that to earn more money, make more money, sell, produce, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really about this idea, this mentality shift about, what's the end goal? What's the end goal for us?
Hmm.
And I think that's something each individual has to define for themselves.
Wow. Interesting. So, wow, so exciting. So let's jump into the strategy session, where we get to where you get to, give
Sure.
us the practical insights. Okay, guys, you can do this, and do this. All right.
Mm,
So,
yeah, of course. Mm,
so talking about the transformative economy, in the publications, I
yeah.
highlighted that one thing that needs to be done, the foundation for all of this to become a possibility, the creation of an innovation culture, the innovation, the shifting of
Mm,
developing economies, the shifting of the economic landscapes, and all of that depends on one factor alone, which is creating an enabling
mm,
environment for value creation. That is
right.
the crux of
Right.
it. And this became my realization as an
Yeah.
undergraduate, where I noticed that within the four walls of the university, it looks like a vibrant ecosystem where, for learning, it's, you
Mm,
can see you see talents, you see everything. But when you step right outside, the community, the university walls, the local community is not getting better for it. So it didn't make sense that universities were located in local communities and with so much talents and resources that the local community wasn't getting better for it, right? And then the environment,
mhm.
even within the university, only supported scholarly competence. It didn't support value creation. So how can the undergraduate community create their own enabling environment that reduces the cost of innovation, but increases access to explore opportunity by creating these same global solutions to the local problems that they encounter with every day?
Right, right. So I think one of the most interesting resources of undergraduate students is time.
Hmm.
Once you leave school, you just don't have the time to sit down and reflect and think and dream about all the things that you can do, because there is
Hmm.
simply no time. You've got bills to pay, people to feed.
Exactly.
Um, and so maybe some people even have to do that while they're in school. But anyhow, so for me, right, as an undergraduate, my primary focus would be on time. And so if it is that I'm trying to improve value creation as an undergraduate, one thing that I would look out for is looking at the community, like especially like if you have community leaders or community elders, and seeing if there are projects that you can partner with them on. Because the first step is that it gives you experience in learning from these elders, as well as creating value and doing innovation in a safe way, right? Because you're still in university. And then for the community, it gives them an opportunity to be exposed to the resources of the university and also to work together on a problem that maybe they have some idea of the solution, but they just need young people to help them structure it or to help them build it or to help them execute it. So that would be one thing that I would say. For example, like when I was in undergrad, there were so many opportunities. And one of them I was really fascinated with, it was a geothermal energy project in like an island off Honduras. And they were looking for just someone to help them do research about what are the geothermal potentials of this small island. And so I was like, yeah, I want to do that, right? I get to learn from industry experts from this cool island that I had never heard of before, and they get this resource from a student who's just interested in doing something. And so that gave me the exposure, right, to creating research and also to solution finding and presenting to a board of director. And for them, it got the time of the student that a student is able to give. And so for me, it's about encouraging undergraduate students to be proactive. Don't wait for things to fall on your lap. Like if you are saying that, oh my God, there's nothing to do, the community outside isn't growing, go outside, go talk to the community. I promise you, they, even if they're hostile at the beginning, if you keep talking to them, building relationship, they will want your input because they know, right? Young people are the future. And so just being proactive. And if that elder or that leader doesn't want your help, guess what? You can move on to someone else, right? So that for me is a really key part about being proactive. If there's something you don't like, go out and find it and change it.
Wow. Awesome. I couldn't have expected another response as brilliant as that. So let's jump right into the second question. It's also a follow-up, but it's a follow-up to the question, to the conversation we had about culture. So let's contextualize your
Yeah.
response to culture of innovation, but at a local level. So if we were to think of culture
Right.
as an onion ring, right? It gets worse. The impact of this cultural dysfunction gets worse when you go down, because at the local level, they are even exposed to culture within an unenabling environment of their own economic reality. To make that simpler, it means because they
Right.
are poorer there, they are more distracted with survival than trying to even solve
Yep.
their
Yep.
actual problem. So how do we
Yep.
create
That's
a
right.
culture for innovation that they can relate with because it directly impacts them within this same dysfunction that we're trying to work with?
Yes. Yes. It's acutely accurate. What you just talked about is something every developing economy has to deal with. Now, for me, I don't know which aspect you meant, like government or what young people, like well, you guys are even younger than I am. So what really young people can do. Um, and so I can first talk about it from the government side, and then I can
Yeah,
talk about it from what we can do side.
yeah.
So from the government side, I always said that I don't understand how governments can't understand that you can't get crime to go down and you can't get people to be committed to prosperity if every day they're worried about where the next meal is coming from.
Exactly.
It's
Hmm.
just impossible for
Hmm.
someone who doesn't know where their next food is coming from to focus on like what they're going to do in 10 years. Who cares
Hmm.
about 10 years? I don't know what I'm having for dinner today.
Hmm.
So and even worse, right? They have kids. they have children, to right, survival is first for people in these situations. And so there is no capacity for them to think about um really future stuff, unless you have kids who are just out of this world genius or out of this world brilliant, which we've seen a lot of stories coming out of different countries from Africa in these situations. But the norm is that people who are in these situations just don't have the brain capacity to spend on what's the future like. So on the government side, it definitely needs to focus on providing the direct support and resources that are needed for these people. Now,
Mm.
different people have different ideas about what that looks like. Some people think universal basic income is a way to go. Some people
Mm.
think that, trading schools in these different communities is the proper way to go. Some people think that, schooling programs, let's say like the YMCA or any like community, what do you call them? Like community centers in these poorer areas are critical. It doesn't matter
Mm.
which one you ascribe to, as long as the government is trying to address that aspect. That's a critical aspect, of getting people beyond the survival mechanism. So a lot of research has been done about that, so I won't say any more about that. So people, individuals, what can young people do? What can individuals do? So there are two aspects, right?
Mm.
So the first aspect is working from a top-down mechanism. So you
Mm.
can say, look, poor people follow trends, right? They don't
Yeah.
have the insights to be able to see something before it blows up.
Yeah, problems. Yeah.
And so what you can do is you can find something that you're right, find something you're passionate about, get investor partnership and international support, and then people will adopt it locally,
Mm.
right? So that's the top down approach. Then the bottoms up approach is that you can sort of try to understand what are the major pain
Pain
points
points.
of
Mm.
these communities, and try to fill or try to solve one of these pain points with a simple solution.
Mm.
And then you will get their support, or you'll get them to move towards being more self-sustaining, being
Sustaining. Yeah.
more innovative,
Mm.
because you've removed, yes, because you've removed a
Those
pain point from
barriers.
their
Yeah.
survival journey.
Mm.
So those are the right, exactly. So those are the two ways that I see as individuals we can assist with. So for example, if you are really good at mathematics and you realize that in your local community or in the community next to you or in two towns over, students just aren't, let's say they aren't passing their subjects, or they don't go past grade 5, or they don't go past grade 8, then you can offer, let's say, tutoring classes, right? Like
Mm.
you can say, hey guys, I'm offering XYZ, or I'm going to blah blah blah, right? That could be a solution.
Mm.
You can even have other solutions, right, where other companies, I've seen them in Africa, where people are unbanked,
Yeah.
right? So they don't have bank accounts because it's just too expensive and it's too time consuming. And so you have these small apps that just allow you to do banking on your phone, right? Really
Yeah.
simple banking.
Even agency banking too.
Another one could be, that's right. That's right. That's right.
Mm.
I know here in China they also did that. I don't know if you guys know, like the Alipay and WeChat
Oh
Pay.
yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, long before, yeah, right, right, long before China, was as developed as it is now, lots of people were unbanked in villages,
Mm.
in the mountains, and they
Mm.
created a very simple system or a very simple platform where they could do peer-to-peer banking, and so
Exactly.
completely cut out the big banks.
Mm.
Right, right. So that's another like localized solution. I saw this back home in Jamaica. Another example is this woman, she is a farmer, and the COVID, right, really shut down the supermarkets. And so the supermarkets weren't buying her produce. And so she created her own produce delivery system where people would message
Wow.
her what they want. She'd pack up her truck and deliver them directly, right?
Awesome.
So it's really about um,
Solving problems.
and enabling yourself
Mm.
to believe that you can do it.
Mm.
Yes,
Mm.
yes, that really is it. Just believing that you can do it and taking that first step, honestly.
Wow, awesome. And I I'm a believer in the second approach of bottom up, because I think, when we take
Mm,
all of these insights you've given and then we start innovating around our local problems. And one problem again from this same copy and paste culture is that we think every solution has to be tech enabled for it to work. But within the local context,
yeah,
in their own growth cycle, they are not there yet. So, like the example
yeah.
you gave, someone offering tutoring services to those kids, can easily charge a little amount, but work with the volume, because you make money saying, okay, normally a class can
Mm,
hold 50. So instead of you paying, a monthly fee, you just pay per class, right? But because you're taking
mm,
100 students at a time, you're still
right,
profitable. So there are models
right,
that we can adopt, and
right,
I'm
right.
advocating that the young people in the undergraduate community are the ones should be saddled with this responsibility. But moving on, right? I just got really excited about your response. So, last question as a follow up is, you talked about the international partnerships, and
Mm,
my little knowledge of physics. There's this Newton's law of motion, the first one, that says that except there's an external force, acting on acting on an
mm,
object in inertia, it is going to remain in the same state. And that is what I think
that's
would
right.
shift Africa. I think if we're going to develop systems, it has to be developed with
Mm,
it has to be from it's from inside outside, but it has to be with the external force of outside. So international partnerships are going to
mm,
international partnerships done right, if I may add, is going to
mm-hmm,
radically change
mm.
the economic outlook of Africa. So how do you think the undergraduate community, which, if I remind you, is the most underserved in this conversation, right? How do we position the undergraduate community
Definitely.
for international partnerships and international exploration of opportunities?
Brand building.
Hmm.
It has to be
Hmm.
brand building. This is something that very super wealthy people and families
Hmm.
teach their children from they are babies,
Hmm.
2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. They
Hmm.
introduce them to people. They teach them about perception. They teach them
Hmm.
about image. They teach them
Hmm.
about relationships. Ah, this is something we just do not practice until we are in our 30s or 40s. This is crazy. This is something that I have realized is so critical to building generational solutions and generational wealth is your brand building, because you don't know what you are capable of until you are exposed to a wider range of people who are doing amazing and different things. It's just human nature, right? So if I grow up and the people around me, the highest level of what they do is what I think will be possible for myself. And so if I open my vision to what's around me, then my vision of what's possible for myself will automatically increase.
True.
Right. So if I, for example, if I hang around with millionaires, I'm going to become a millionaire. If I
Hmm.
hang around with people who don't do anything all day, I will end up not doing anything all day. Right.
Hmm.
So it's really about brand building, both in person and online.
Hmm.
So the in-person one is about building mentors. You
Yeah.
must have a really strong set of mentors that you can bounce ideas off, that they can encourage you to take the risk, that they can support you when you fail, because believe me, you will fail in life,
Hmm.
right? Like that's just normal. But you must have the strength, right, to be able to get up and do it again and not to take it personally.
Hmm.
So having mentors in person is really great. Now, if you don't have anyone around you that can really serve as a mentor, again, the beauty of the internet, right? You
Mm.
can find mentors through, books, through, TV shows, through free services, through all these online webinars that people are putting out now because of COVID-19. So many free sessions for students. It blows my mind. I'm happy to
Mm.
also share content and companies that are doing that. Like there's one, as a side note, there's one, it's called One Salting. They're
Oh, I know.
brand new. They
Yeah,
just launched in the last 7 or 8 months. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
know one Sultan,
Super helpful for students, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and Jerry Lee.
That's right. That's right. Jeremy, right, right. Jerry and Jeremy or something like that. And so they produce this free content that gives students the real core information that they need to be successful. So lots of resources like that if you can't find it in person. And then online, right? Your persona, your professional persona online will bring you leads that you had never thought possible, right?
Mm.
So even if you don't know how it will bring you benefit, just trust that building an online persona is really helpful for your future. And if you're able to utilize it in a way that's useful, you can get jobs, you can get leads, you can get partners, you can get investors, all through having your online brand. Um, and so that's the first thing. The second thing is about the mentality, right? The
Mm.
mental I keep saying
Same.
mentality
Yeah,
shift.
yeah.
Finding a way, and yeah, yeah, finding a way to just tell yourself that you can do it, right?
Yeah.
Like whatever your dream is now, people say it all the time. If it doesn't scare you, it's not big enough.
Yeah.
You go to these developed economies, these kids have been
Mm.
told their entire lives that they are going to be successful. They can be the CEO, they are going to be the boss. So they grow up through life. Yes, you can do it. They grow up through life being told that they can do it. You bet
Mm.
when they are in college, university, when they're in their first job, they hit the ground running, right?
Mm.
Because all their life they've been told that they can do it. We
Mm.
need to do that for ourselves. We need to do that for our kids. We need to do that for our brothers, for our sisters, cousins, aunties, uncles. We need to develop this culture of support,
Mm.
right? Like, because it's such a critical aspect of success, right? Like, if you believe you can do it, you're going to do it.
Mm.
Now, if you believe you can't do it, you're not going to try.
Mm.
And so I think the mentality shift is really the second important part for, especially for university students. University students have so much potential,
Mm.
right? Like, it's so full of hope. You have time, right? You are connected to the problems. You're digital natives, right? Like, you have so much potential. And
Mm.
so if no one is telling you in your life that you can do it, I'm telling you now, you can do it.
Mm.
So don't let anyone ever hold you back from your dreams. Don't let yourself hold you back from your dreams. So that's the second part. The third one, which is really important, is you have to back it up. You
Mm.
can't just have a dream and then pray to God and say, God, make this dream come true.
Have to take
You have to
action.
work for it, right?
Yeah. Mm.
You have to take action, right?
Mm.
So, yes, God will be there to protect you and work with you, but you must work,
Mm.
right? So, the third aspect is you must be willing to work.
Mm.
And work doesn't only mean, right, work yourself to death for someone else. A lot of
Mm.
times, work means signing up for that free online Google class about coding for beginners. Work
Mm.
means, going on Harvard's website and taking their free online courses for university, because Harvard has that now because of COVID.
Mm.
Work means, going online and searching free online courses about business, right?
Mm.
So work means different things for different people. Maybe you're really passionate about crafting, right? Maybe you're passionate about jewelry making. Maybe you're passionate about hair. Maybe you're passionate about engineering, technology, business, whatever it is that you're passionate about, you have to work for it. You have to give yourself the resources, and there are a lot of free resources out there. So those are the three things that I would say. You have to work on your branding.
Mm.
Then you have to find the mentorship, right? And
Mentorship.
then
Yeah.
you have to do the work.
Do the work. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do the work.
Wow, simple, straightforward, and of course, brilliant. Thank you so much. We
Mhm.
just have one more question on the forum. So now we are in the section of the forum, and
Sure.
then we'll end this session. So one very important thing to making all of this
Yeah, sure.
a reality is the ability of the undergraduate community to form multi-stakeholder relationships. In this transformative economy that
Mm,
we're trying to create or we're trying to drive, we would need to engage different stakeholders with different self-interest, with different inclinations and
yeah,
experiences. So
yeah,
our ability or our development of that skill to drive multi-stakeholder relationships is a very critical component of the development of a transformative economy. So
yes,
what do you think is that one area of impact that you think
yeah,
the undergraduate community can focus on right now to drive these multi-stakeholder relationships, that will create an economic value creation ecosystem within the enabling environment that we're trying to build for, the shift in Africa's narrative?
yeah, yeah. My recommendation would be put yourself in spaces where you think you don't belong,
Hmm.
right? So
Okay.
if you are not from an elite background or elite community, whatever, 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 put yourself or try to put yourself in these spaces, let's say like a networking group, a university group, let's say an online scholarship, whatever these areas are that you think you don't belong or people tell you you don't belong, put yourself in those places.
Wow. Hmm.
Because to be able to be very good at multi-stakeholder management, you need to have multiple experiences in managing different stakeholders, right? You
Hmm.
don't learn how to do multi-stakeholder management by only being in the space where you feel comfortable.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you must be able and willing and humble enough to put yourself in spaces where you may fail for a little while, but then eventually, exactly, build the diverse experiences necessary to be able to do multi stakeholder management. Now, this is a very difficult thing for people to accept and grasp because as
Yes, it
human
is.
beings, we don't
Mhm.
like to be in spaces where we're uncomfortable.
Comfortable. Yeah. Mm.
Right? So we
Mm.
like to be in spaces, yes, we like to be in spaces where we're comfortable, where
Our
we're
comfort
happy, where we don't have
zone.
any
Mm.
problems.
Mm.
So that would be, yeah, so that would be my first recommendation is put yourself in spaces where you feel like you shouldn't be or that you don't belong.
Mm.
Especially if they're elite spaces, because then you can even not just learn multi-stakeholder management, but also learn about how these people think.
Think
It's
exactly.
just, it's
Mm.
unbelievable. They
Mm.
think in just a different way.
Mm.
um and once you start to learn from them, it's
Mm.
amazing what it does for your finances, what it does for your professional life, what it does for your personal life. All of a sudden you're believing you can be president of your country, or right,
Mm.
CEO of your Fortune 500 company, right? So
Mm.
definitely putting yourself in those types of spaces. The second one, which is something I myself still struggle with, is the emotional intelligence component.
Mm.
So I don't know if you guys have this similar problem, but Jamaicans are not really known for being the most understanding people in the world. um, we are known to be combative and a little sassy and angry and all these other things. I'm
Mm.
personally very introverted, so I don't get into these loud fights. But I have found that I'm not very empathetic or sympathetic. It's very hard for me to empathize with something that I personally don't experience, and
Mm.
so it does present a problem sometimes in my multi-stakeholder management when I'm not able to understand why this person, is, let's say, having a difficult time on my project, or why this
Mm.
person is even crying in my office, right? So right, this is something that you just have
Mm.
to you have to work on. I can't tell you how to work on it because I'm still trying to figure that out myself. But
Mm,
having really strong emotional intelligence is a very critical component to being able to manage effectively stakeholders, different stakeholders. And you can see a very clear example of what happens when you don't have that, right? I believe the
mm,
president of the United States, the current president, that just doesn't have any emotional intelligence. And so it makes it very difficult for him to do effective multiple stakeholder management. So that's what I mean by you have to be able to build this emotional intelligence. And those are two things that if you master those two things, you are already better than 90% of the entire human population.
wow, it has been an exciting conversation from the top to the bottom. I wish we wouldn't stop, but of course I know you have multiple other engagements, and I really
Right,
value
right, right.
the time invested with us. So thank you so much, Stacey-Ann. It was
I
such a
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
It's been
No
a
problem,
pleasure,
no
an
problem.
exciting experience having you on the
Yeah,
forum on the venture.
right,
So
right, right, right.
awesome.
Of course,
Thank
of
you
course.
so
It was
much.
also my great pleasure. And I want to keep my promise. I want you guys to do your Chinese sentence.
Yes. Haha. Yes. Okay. How do we do this?
Yes, I mean, I is everyone from, would you say everyone is from Nigeria, or would you say it's probably
Yes.
better to say like African?
No.
Everyone's
All
from
of
Nigeria, or should you say
yes.
African?
Yes. This from Nigeria. Everyone here is from Nigeria, but also, keeping in context that this session is recorded and it will be accessible anytime, anywhere in the world. You can also
Ah, okay, okay,
do an
okay.
African shout out, but most of the people live on the call right now are
All
Nigerians.
right, sure, 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 sure. Okay, so maybe then we can say I come from Africa, or I'm from Africa, or I'm of African descent. Right?
Okay.
So we could say hello, I'm from Africa. So
Okay.
obviously the hello is ni hao.
Ni
Ni
hao.
hao.
Ni
Yeah,
hao.
yeah, yeah. And then
Okay.
it's yeah, ni hao. And then I is just wo, wo.
Wa. Okay.
You can do it. You can do it. War. Yeah. War.
Wa. Wa.
And then yeah, war. Like what? It's just war.
Wa. Wa. Okay.
War. War. So let's review. So we have hello, I, and you just say
Ni
ni
hao
hao,
wa.
war. Right. So
Did I get
war.
it?
Yeah. War. So
Okay.
that's the first one. Yeah, war. So come from, it's basically light. This one is a little hard. Just
Okay.
lie, like lie, you too lie. You're lying,
Lie.
lie,
Lie.
lie. Yeah, and then yeah, yeah, yeah. And then this one is very difficult. So I don't know how to help you with this one. Zzz, zzz. Just zzz. Like a bee, like a bee. Zzz.
Z-
我来自自我来自
okay. 我
so
来
just
自
来自 like you're saying
来
来
自
yeah 我来自
okay.
yeah 我来自 so that's I come from, and then Africa is 非洲
非洲
非洲 that's really simple,
非
right?
洲 okay.
Yeah 非洲 yeah
Okay.
非洲. So put it together, you have hi, I come from Africa, right? So 你好，我来自非洲. Yeah,
Okay.
somebody
So
wrote
let
it
me
in the group with the correct tones. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay, awesome. So let me
Go
try
for
it.
it. 你
你
好，
好，我来自你是
非洲。
非洲啊，非洲，
非洲。
非洲. All right, awesome.
That's right. That's right. Right,
Anyone,
right,
anyone can always
right.
access this. Wow, that's exciting. I'm definitely going to
Yeah, yeah,
brush up on my
yeah.
Chinese.
So, yeah,
Exciting,
so the
exciting.
full way would just be 你好，我来自非洲。对，你
What of
好，我来
Nigeria?
自
Does
非
Nigeria
洲。
have its own
Yeah.
Chinese word too?
Yes, Nigeria is a long. I had to look it up. It's Nigeria. It's much harder than Feijo.
Okay, let's just do Africa. I think we're fine. We are Africans, so so that's just as exciting as it gets. We'll take our
So,
Chinese
yeah,
routines there.
Nigeria is ni ri li ya. Yeah, that one's a hard one. Ni ri li ya. Ni ri li ya. Yeah,
Wow.
that's a hard one.
Okay.
Yeah, ni ri li ya.
Okay.
Ni
Awesome.
ri li ya. Yeah,
Wow.
well,
This
I
has been so
Feijo.
much,
Ni hao,
so
well, I
much fun.
Feijo.
So much fun. Yeah, so much fun.
Of
Thank you
course.
so
Well, thank
much.
you.
All
Thank you.
right.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Thank
we've
you.
come to the end of the
Feel
forum, the
free.
venture. Okay.
Yeah. I was gonna say, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to share with Toyin all the resources and everything that could be helpful. And then you can continue to connect through him. And this is fantastic. And continue to be your amazing selves. Believe that you can change the world, and you are the future.
Awesome. Such powerful closing. Thank you so much. So everybody have a great day. This will be made available. Stacey-Ann, I'm going to send you a follow-up email so we could, as we
Okay.
spoke before, so we could just follow up on the conversations, and then we have so much to talk about as usual.
Sure.
All right, awesome. So have a
Right.
great
Right.
day.
Right.
What is bye bye?
Awesome.
What is bye bye in Chinese?
再见.
Saijian.
再见.
Okay, Saijian.
再见. Yeah. 再
Saijian.
见.
Saijian.
再见. All right. 再
All
见.再
right
见.
then.
Bye bye.
Bye.